Warning, if you're having a good day and consider yourself pretty happy, do not watch this video. And on a more serious note, if you're depressed or having a really bad day, also do not watch this video. Philipp Mainlander has become one of the most requested philosophers to cover for my Forgotten Philosophers series, and this is arguably due to his notoriety as the most pessimistic philosopher. It was only since the beginning of this year, 2024, that his work, The Philosophy of Redemption, was finally given a physical English translation by Christian Romus, finally making Mainlander accessible to many of us. Philipp Mainlander was born as Philipp Batz in Hesse, Germany in 1841. Many people in his family, including Philipp himself, struggled deeply with mental illness. When he was 16, Philipp was studying at a commercial school to become a merchant when his older brother Daniel took his own life. Despite these hardships, Philipp continued to study and work, eventually finding employment in Italy. It was here that he discovered philosophy, specifically the work of Arthur Schopenhauer, who became a strong influence in Philipp's own philosophy. After his mother passed away when he was just 24, he went deeper and deeper into philosophy, searching for the answers to these questions that he had. When he turned 32, he joined the military, becoming a cavalry soldier, but felt tired and just worn out, so he left early. During the months leading up to his conscription, he started working on the philosophy of redemption. He decided to use the pen name Philipp Mainlander, which referenced his hometown. After finishing the book, it was finally published around 1876. On April 1st of that year, however, Mainlander took his own life. He was just 34 years old. Many questions remain as to Mainlander's motive behind his suicide, but by reading his book we could try to determine what led him down this path. The book is divided into 6 chapters: analytics, physics, aesthetics, ethics, politics, and metaphysics. So this really does cover almost all the different fields of philosophy. Now I don't know about you, but me, I'm an ethics guy, and this is an ethics channel. But to really understand Mainlander's thought, we can't just jump to the ethics section and only read that. But on the other hand, a good chunk of this book is isolated within the field that it's talking about, especially a chapter on aesthetics. But thankfully, I'll be your guide in determining what's relevant and not in order to get a general overview of Mainlander's thought. Let's start with his metaphysics. For Mainlander, the world we live in right now is full of individuality and movement. No two things are alike, whether it be people or rocks or plants. We all have these differences that may be minuscule, but are differences nonetheless. We are in a world of multiplicity. Furthermore, there is a constant movement everywhere. As people, we move towards bettering or sustaining our lives. We move when we want something. We move when we get something. We are constantly moving. This is not so much a physical movement, although there is a lot of that, but rather a kind of spiritual movement. We're always after something, and even an ascetic monk has to eat, sleep, and breathe. The same applies to animals, plants, and yes, even inorganic materials such as chemicals. Now we'll return to what ultimately motivates this movement, but for now we have our general overview of the world we live in, according to Mainlander. It's full of multiplicity and full of movement. If we examine ourselves further, then we find ourselves in ceaseless motion. Our force is essentially restless and unceasing. But where did all this come from? What was the first movement that set this all up? Following a chain of causality, Mainlander determines that this came from, essentially, the opposite of the world we are in now. This world of multiplicity and movement came from a single unity and rest. The first motion and the arising of the world are one and the same. The transformation of the simple unity into the world of multiplicity. I know this is abstract and I'm proud of you for sticking with me. So to summarize, before all of this, there was this simple unity where there was just one thing and there was no movement. This unity then disintegrated into the world we live in now, with multiplicity in individual entities and movement. What's interesting to me is that this sounds similar to the Big Bang Theory. No, not that awful show, but the idea that there was this one, which dispersed into a multiplicity. However, Mainlander takes a very controversial turn when he starts to name this unity. We also have the right to give this essence that familiar name, which from time immemorial has designated what no imaginative power, no flight of the boldest fancy, no thinking however deep or abstract, no composed, devout soul, no ecstatic mind wrapped on high has ever attained. God. Yes, the simple unity that preceded this world is God. God was. He was one. He was all, and he was at rest. But then God disintegrated, and out of him came the multiplicity and movement we see in the world. God has died, and his death was the life of the world. So we have another God is dead proclamation in philosophy, but this time it's more metaphysical, as opposed to Nietzsche's emphasis on meaning. But we now have our general outline of Mainlander's metaphysics, which will help us when we determine his ethics, and possibly determine his motivations for taking his own life. Next, I want to return to this movement that we find in the world we live in now. What exactly is this movement, and what's motivating it? For Mainlander, this movement which governs not just all of our activities, but the activities for the organic and inorganic world, is the will to life. If you're a Schopenhauer fan, then you've probably heard this term before. In a very general sense, the will to life is an innermost drive to exist and to continue existing. This is done by doing things to preserve your life, but also by having offspring, so you feel that your existence will continue on through them. We could do a whole video on the will to life, but that's the general summary. But wait a minute, if everything is motivated by a will to life, why did Mainlander take his own life? Isn't that contrary to the will to life that states that we should aspire to preserve our life and further our existence? Well, this is where Mainlander takes a sharp turn from Schopenhauer and says that the will to life is a facade that hides our true will, the will to death. Everything in the world is will to death, which in the organic realm appears more or less veiled as will to life. Wait, what? How on earth does one's desire to keep existing somehow hide a secret fact that we inherently have a will to death? For Mainlander, the end result of existence in the end is always death. It's inescapable. Nature will grow old and eventually die. To will life is just to prolong that process, to age slowly but still eventually die. To live life is to age, and to age is to slowly die. Therefore, by willing life, you will aging, sickness, and eventually, your own demise. He is at his foundation will to death, because the chemical ideas which constitute his type and, coming and going, maintain him in existence want death. But since they can only attain it through weakening, and there is no more effective means to this than the willing of life, so the means steps demonically in front of the end, life in front of death, and man manifests himself as pure will to life. To Mainlander, everyone intrinsically wants the same thing, to die. People just get to that destination differently. This will to death is what I'd call potential motive number 1 for Mainlander's suicide, but there's 2 more I want to talk about. The second potential motive is found in the section on ethics, and it concerns what true happiness is, and what the value of human life is. Let's get Mainlander's overall conclusion out of the way first. Life in general is a wretchedly miserable thing. It has always been wretched and miserable, and will always be wretched and miserable, and it is better not to be than to be. So that's a pretty bold statement. Let's see what he uses to back it up. Firstly, as we stated before, there's a ceaseless motion in our lives that causes us to will life continuously. We want to exist, but we also want to exist in a particular way, i.e., we have desires. But to desire something, we have to be without that thing in the first place, which gives a feeling of displeasure. And when we get that thing, the moment of happiness is usually fleeting. It's like when you were a kid and you had an intense desire for a certain toy. When you got that toy, it was nice at first, but you quickly grew out of it. Likewise, every met desire must be accompanied by the pain of that initial unmet desire. Every vivid feeling of pleasure must therefore be purchased with a vivid feeling of unpleasure. And with every purchase of this kind, the will ultimately gains nothing. Life is therefore mostly suffering. Any pings in pleasure will eventually disappear, and this must be purchased through suffering. Mainlander cites examples of great thinkers who came to the realization that life is suffering. The most understandable of these examples is the Buddha, who grew up as a prince with every desire he could possibly want being met, and yet, he ultimately saw the inherent suffering in life. Now, if you're still not convinced, Mainlander has one more argument that life is suffering. You might say, okay Mainlander, life is suffering, but that's because of things like hunger, war, pain, sickness, poverty, and all the other hardships in life. If we could do away with all of that, then life wouldn't be suffering. Mainlander accepts this challenge and asks us to envision a utopian society where all the problems of the world are solved. Motivated by the will to life, humanity has progressed and moved to a point where there is no hunger, no war, no sickness. Science has literally reached its limit and discovered everything. Would this utopian society be free of suffering? No. For Mainlander, they would succumb to extreme boredom. The will to life and movement is still there, inherent in us humans, but there'd be nowhere left to go, thus leading us again to Mainlander's conclusion that life is suffering. But more importantly, he sees what the logical conclusion of such a utopian state would be. Thus, if humanity finds itself in the ideal state, then there can be no rest. But whither shall it then move? There is but one motion left to it, the motion towards complete annihilation, the motion out of being into non-being. and humanity will carry out this motion in irresistible yearning for the rest of absolute death. So our potential motive number 1 was a will to death. And now our potential motive number 2 is this idea that life is suffering. Finally, I want to get to the last potential motive, which to me was the most disheartening, I'll say. Remember Mainlander's metaphysics? How in the beginning was God, who was a resting, simple unity, which then disintegrated into this world of multiplicity and movement? Well, Mainlander is careful not to speak too much on this God since he's transcendent. But if God disintegrated himself, then what does that imply? Non-being must simply have earned preference over supra-being, or else God in his perfect wisdom would not have chosen it. Yes, if we take Mainlander's metaphysical scheme very seriously, it's implied that God himself chose to commit suicide, or chose non-being over being. This was definitely the most impactful part of reading Mainlander. Now look, I ultimately disagree with him and think foundationally he's too quick to call this unity God. But if you're Mainlander, and in your philosophical scheme God took his own life, then that's a further motivating force, making it potential motive number 3. It's probably not one or the other which leads to Mainlander's decision, but rather a combination of 3 or more. There is a lot in this book I didn't cover, but hopefully this motivates you to pick it up yourself, as it's a brand new release and we want to encourage more obscure philosophy books to be translated into English. But yep, that's the life and philosophy of Philipp Mainlander. I want to take this time to remind everyone that there are many philosophical systems, and they could be debated and critiqued to infinity and beyond. On this channel alone, we've covered many conflicting worldviews. So if you find yourself agreeing with Mainlander on things, just know that he is not the end-all be-all of philosophy, and you should continue to explore other viewpoints. Furthermore, if you are suffering from depression, please seek professional help, and if you are having suicidal ideations, then contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline on the screen right now. Thanks for sticking with me on this long video, but I know Mainlander was highly requested, so I really wanted it to be high quality. On a related note, feel free to leave suggestions for other forgotten philosophers below. If you did enjoy this video, then be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button for more. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.